Thank you. Thank you for having me. I want to thank all of you that helped put this together. Sheila for inviting me and the voice of the conference for tonight. And I wore my jacket and my pen. I didn't put any bling on it. I should have done that. Uh, this is a unique conference. It is unique in its design and purpose. It repeatedly raises the bar of discussion around the country. And I'm really grateful for it. I've had the opportunity to go to it in person a couple, 3 or 4 times, and now get to present on virtual land in it. The basics before I forget, yes, my service group is C.P.C chair for East Bay Intergroup in the San Francisco Bay Area. I'm also one of the leads on the National PI and C.P.C working group. We're going to talk a little bit more about that later. My home group, as Debbie mentioned, is Tuesday night BYO book study, 8 o'clock in Hayward. It's currently parked on Zoom, but you're welcome to join us. If you're new to AAA, have no concern. You've missed out on nothing. PICPC is not a new designer drug. We get that in the rooms frequently. People don't know what this is. PI stands for Public Information and CPC stands for Cooperation with the Professional Community. These committees are tasked with carrying the primary purpose of AA to the community, not our rooms. So the name of this talk is our primary aim, aiming for great things, I hope. The primary purpose, to carry the message to the still suffering by making friends in the greater community, those that have never heard of us and those that have first contact with the alcoholic. And I had a lot of contact with those on the front line, those that had first contact. That was before I finally learned how to stay sober. I'm not sure if they were my friends or if they wanted me to be their friends when we had our first contact, but either way, those were the people that needed to know what an alcoholic was. And I thoroughly enjoy carrying the message by helping those people understand. I want to spend some time this evening discussing where we came from, where we're at, and where we could be with a common cause and some common solutions. I might suggest tonight that we are short of friends in the 21st century out in the greater community. I'm also going to suggest some simple things that we can do to make some friends. And I might suggest some things that sound like big ideas. Maybe those big ideas came from our founding members. I'm a bit of a historian and I kind of like looking at what they did in the past that worked. I don't know where this is coming from. It just popped up in my head. One of the early members I became acquainted with was a guy with a message of unity. There are many friends of this man in this room tonight, and I don't think I should probably call him out. He spent his life talking about carrying the message through our groups and committees. The primary purpose of our groups, he spent a great deal of time on. Our responsibility to the still suffering was always in this man's message. He talked about how someone from a C.P.C committee was responsible for his sobriety. I have somewhat the same story. The traditions allow us to operate as a group in love, not fear. I got that message from that man as well. Now that I got that out of my system, I don't know where that came from. Let's move on. As a member of AA, I recognize daily that I stand on the shoulders of some giants. The founders of this organization, the folks that were willing to take the hit to bring this program to the world. They were willing to face scorn and contempt, take a chance and fail. And they had a lot of failures along the way. In the face of all odds against them, they faced their fears and prevailed. This program was started by a number of visionaries. I'm constantly surprised at the sophistication of Bill and Lois, Dr. Bob, Ann, and dozens of others responsible for bringing AA to the world. And let's not forget the endless stream of non-alcoholic friends that helped kickstart this program. Non-alcoholics that dedicated their lives, like Judith Ann, to seeing that AA came to life and survived through the generations. The early members sent out folks to different cities, and in those cities, they divided they went out into the divided boroughs and ghettos of every race, color, creed, and sexual identification in the very early days. Meetings sprung up in those communities and spread to others. For those that don't know, the third tradition came from a man who had another addiction, as they called it in 1937. While we no longer call homosexuality an addiction, the social stigma of that condition was far worse in 1937 than alcoholism. In fact, it came with some prison sentences and a few other things. There was some heated discussion about that gentleman in Akron at the time. The edict and tradition 3 were laid in stone by the decision to let that man into AA. The only requirement is that he also be an alcoholic. Dr. Bob said, what would the master do? And that was the final decision to let that man in. I've heard from some old timers that that same man went on to sponsor a great many men, most of them straight men. One big idea we might adopt that I would like to hear more of in our rooms these days. This may be the most welcoming organization in the history of mankind. We invite everyone through the door. In the 1940s, that was unheard of for any organization. We still do. Anybody is welcome in our rooms. If we've learned anything from the year of the virtual, as I like to call it, the language of the heart transcends all barriers and obstacles. We've watched people around the world get sober in the Hollywood squares of Zoom land. It's been absolutely amazing. We found out that one drunk helping another works, even knee to knee in Zoom. We also found a way to do service and connect around the world with other committees and share our experiences. I'm going to speak on that as well tonight. I came to AA in 1981, but I could not stay sober no matter what. I was one of those. I had no solution, and some of those around me had no solution for me either. I bounced around for 12 miserable years. In 1994, I finally got dry. In 13 months later, Tinder dry in 1995. I was at a conference, and trust me, it wasn't a conference like this one in any way. And an old timer set me down with a big book and explained what an alcoholic is and how to get sober. He started with the doctor's opinion. And that's always been a great deal to me. He sent me back to San Francisco to work steps 4 through 12, which I did. And I got connected with some folks that were in service. These guys went out several times a week to places like the Salvation Army in San Francisco, and they expected me to do the same. Even though I was scared and nervous, they expected it. That was the agreement we made from the start. For some reason, these guys didn't want me at the Salvation Army, and they shipped me off to the Tenderloin. Some reason they thought that I could help in the Tenderloin. Mr. White Bread, Boulder, Colorado could help out in the Tenderloin, right? But I did. I managed to walk through the fear, and I managed to start carrying the message. And we started getting some folks some help, and they started getting sober, and it was really cool to do. A lot of these folks were HIV and AIDS, HIV positive, and had AIDS. And we started taking these guys down to Ward 86, a famous ward for AIDS patients in San Francisco. And they weren't real thrilled to see a bunch of addicts and alcoholics coming. In fact, they had some rules about alcoholics and addicts because, you know, doctors are used to us not listening to them and not following directions with medications and small things like that. But as we took more people in and they started getting well, they got to know us, and an administrator there got to know us, and he had us come in one day and speak to the staff about AA and alcoholism. And then we came back and spoke again until we talked to most of the staff at San Francisco General. And in the meantime, a friend of mine worked for the the satellite office of the National Council on Alcoholism in San Francisco. We have several of them in the Bay Area, actually. And I got hooked up with them, and they were sending 3 or 4 of us around to institutions, universities, and colleges, and the hospitals in San Francisco. And I did C.P.C work for a long time, and it fascinated me. And I was probably the most unlikely speaker there was, but I could get up and talk to you about AA. Ask me anything about me, I couldn't talk to you. But ask me about AA or alcoholism, and I did pretty good with it. That's how I got into this. I've had several people ask me to do that. And I'm going to throw in a little strange, we've had so much history this last year on Zoom land as well. I found out that Dr. Percy Poliak, 55 years earlier in San Francisco, became the head. He came from back east, and he was good friends with Bill and Bob. He was a non-alcoholic, and he helped start AA in San Francisco. But he was also the first man, almost 55 years to the date, before me, that brought the first AA groups into San Francisco General to speak to the healthcare in healthcare people about AA. And I thought that was really fascinating to learn this year. I'll try to stay out of history. I can get carried away here. So I got into the rooms the same way many others did. I first heard of AA when a therapist handed me a big book and suggested I read it before our next appointment. Now I was a little offended. I hadn't told him I drank. It's not like he couldn't smell me coming from 30 paces, right? But I hadn't told him that I was drinking, but he hands me this big book. And my next appointment was in a couple of days, so I promised to read it. So I went home and I did what any good alcoholic would do. I poured a nice tumbler of scotch and I sat out on the deck and read the big book. And I proceeded to understand a few things, and I attempted a private detox, not a good idea. 24 hours later, I was in a professional detox, and they took me to my first meeting. So, like the gentleman I mentioned earlier, I have some C.P.C committee that I owe my life to as well. Someone had talked to that therapist about alcoholism enough to understand that he knew they might help me when he couldn't. So about 5 years ago, I had gotten kind of away from San Francisco meetings and C.P.C and all of that. But about 5 years ago, I started attending a local fellowship that had some 30 plus meetings a week and was loaded with newcomers. This fellowship was not like-minded on the traditions. I'm not going to get way into it, but it became apparent that we were going to have to get creative to get some newcomers into service. So I talked them into letting us start a little PI-C.P.C service group. I kind of failed to mention the only requirements for service would be membership in AA and be sober. There were no time limits to come do service with us. The first professional we approached was interested in learning more, and he had no clue what AA was, and he wanted a website for further information. Now, I'd been part of some of the AA's conversation about web presence over the last 25 years. I knew it was in trouble, and I understood the basics. That led to some research and the discovery that many of our AA websites needed a great deal of help. I was lamenting that someone should do something about this, and a Mary Pearl T of Little Rock, Arkansas, some of you know who she is, and her story about realizing that she was somebody. I had this realization that I'm somebody and I could do something about this. All we needed was a plan, and I'm a good alcoholic, so I can always come up with a plan. Might not be a good plan, but I can come up with a plan. This conversation isn't new. More than one past trustee have given talks at this very conference on how we needed to fix our presence on the internet, and we need some big ideas. We do, but we also need to build a foundation. And when the pandemic hit, the door of opportunity struck as well. So I'd like to show you some of what we've been doing to build on that foundation, and then I'd like to finish up with some other big ideas. And this slideshow, I tried to keep it really short, maybe 8 to 10 minutes. We're going to keep it, and I always get nervous at this particular point because I'm almost always convinced this is never going to work. This is the one thing that is a little shaky on Zoom. And I've done it again. Give me just a moment and we'll get it sorted out. You know, maybe we won't. Give me just a second here, guys. This always drives me crazy.
Tim, it looks like you're sharing the speaker notes for whatever slides you have up.
Yeah, I am. I can't get it to switch. This happens more than once for me. I'm also having a hard time getting it to shut down. Give me just a moment. I have a toolbar hiding behind another toolbar, and that's the problem.
Here, I can do this.
All right, let me start again, guys. Now that I got the toolbar moved. Sorry about that. It usually works for me every time.
There we go.
There we go. Amazing. And it switched again. Let me see if I can back it up. All right, we're good to go. Okay, sorry about that, folks. So we need a quote from Bill Wilson, one of my favorites. We need to constantly scrutinize ourselves carefully in order to make everlasting certain that we shall always be strong enough and single purpose enough from within to relate to ourselves rightly without. And that, of course, is from Bill Wilson, 1946. We started this group in June of 22 in the spirit of the founding members. This is the mission statement of our National PI-CPC working group, finding common solutions to common problems. When we started this, we began to understand the full breadth of the problem PI and CPC committees were having around the world. We have made friends with many delegates and trustees. We want to thank them for all their positive support that they have given us in this group's efforts over the last year. It's been amazing how much support we've had for this. We have a lot of information about alcoholism and AA out in the public right now, and much of it is incorrect. Excuse me, I've been talking all day. My throat's going. Our founders set out to change the misperceptions around the world, and they did. Some of us believe that we can do that same thing today. We may not be the solution for every alcoholic, but we're still the standard that all others use to measure success, including our US government. The phrase alcoholism recovery program in quotes at the top of this is going to come up in just a moment. This is the keyword phrase our little fellowship and East Bay Intergroup voted on as a description on the internet. This keyword phrase is part of how we represent ourselves on the internet. And the lower portion of this is, of course, the statement from the conference about AA and who we are. If somebody goes to the What About page in AA, you'll see that. So if we don't define the AA organization, who will? We have discovered it's far easier to define ourselves today than it was 10 years ago. And I'm going to show you just a few things about that. So the low-hanging fruit of carrying the message, some of the simple things I talked about. Never in history have we had so much access to the public and used so little of that messaging. If Bill were alive today, I believe we'd be using every platform on the internet, and Bill would probably be right up in the middle of creating more of that. Google works to supply information to their customers, but we have to, let's see if I can move this down just a little bit so you guys can see that. It's just one too many toolbars on here. So when our websites don't have a description called a meta description, Google has to guess, and despite all the experts on website building out there telling us that how fantastic Google is at reading our websites, there's no evidence to support that talking point. Our AA websites get listed on all kinds of crazy web searches. Mostly they get ignored, and that part we figured out we can fix. So we're going to discuss the Google business listings for just a moment. I'm only going to spend a minute on this because we've got further information for you if you're interested in getting your local listings fixed. This one just happens to be Portland. It's one of thousands in the United States. In the Bay Area, there may be 100 of these. They're up for different groups, intergroups, areas, districts, et cetera, et cetera. You've all seen these big Google business listings. Google creates these listings for all kinds of companies and organizations. Google encourages all organizations to take ownership and provide better information to the public. These are today's yellow pages ads. Only they don't cost us anything, and Google's in charge of delivering them. It's the coolest thing there is. So you've seen some that look like this. They show up different ways on different platforms, but they're all the same thing. This was our listing of our local fellowship. We were getting ready to move, and somebody suggested that the address was wrong, the pictures were horrible, could we fix it? I pulled it up, and of course you can see what concerned me right off the bat. I don't mind the alcoholism, but I do mind being called a treatment program. So this caused quite a kerfuffle, and that's why we went and got a keyword phrase that we could use. This is what it looks like today. We switched it to a nonprofit organization, and I'm going to show you why this is so important. This is the page because I'm the moderator of this page that shows up, and I just want to show you a few things. When we first took possession of this and we changed the keyword phrase down here, alcoholism recovery program, we changed it to nonprofit. We hooked the website up to a landing page for the public on our intergroup, and of course, this is the hotline number for our hotline at East Bay Intergroup. But what happened was we went from 30 views a month when we took possession of this to over 5,500 views. I know this is hard to read on some screens in 1 month. That's Google delivering this in front of others 5,500 times for people who don't know what AA is or need to find Alcoholics Anonymous if they're in the area. So you will find these all over the world. This one happens to be from Hawaii. I left a couple of these in Hanover, Germany. This was London. They've actually fixed theirs and taken possession of it. And of course, this one is from Durban, South Africa and Australia. I just wanted to show you these things are everywhere. And this was AA World Service about 2 years ago, and they've since fixed theirs as well. So we've been working on that. We're going to switch to just about a minute or two on SEO, which is search engine optimization. Half of the web results delivered are organic or unpaid search, this nice little red area down here. That's what we're interested in AA. Google wants to deliver the best search results for their customers, us, and deliver something that they can make money on, paid ads. The organic search is where we come in. We discovered in 2020 that competing on local organic search can be really easy because the high demand for paid search on terms like alcoholism and how to stop drinking, treatment, etc., are so competitive and so expensive, there's virtually no competition in many geographic areas for organic search. But there's a caveat. We have to tell Google who we are and what we do. So this is what it costs a pay-per-click if you buy an ad. Each time someone clicks on your ad, that's the amount that you pay. And you'll notice that we are in we've got 3 spots in the most expensive ad buys on Google, which is recovery, rehab, and treatment. Remember, some search terms cost $2 to $5, but this treatment center marketing industry has gotten so big and so expensive, we can't compete by buying ads. But what's cool is we don't need to. This is our local intergroup website, and I'm using it as an example because it's a really good example of a really bad website. You'll notice the donate button. It's gone. It says contribute now, but it had a lot of other problems. It was a very old website, and we have a new one coming, but I wanted to show you guys some stuff. This website had no indexing, no analytics, no meta description for Google telling them who we are. It had no privacy policy, which kills a website in search. This website is typical of almost all the AA websites I researched online. There's a handful out there that were really good, but the biggest percentage of them were just like this one. These are the keywords that we're telling Google we want to rank for on this little list on this page. And as you can see, none of them relate to stopping drinking, alcoholism, or much of anything else. If you're looking up public, we don't know what kind of public, and we don't know what kind of information, and we don't know what kind of anonymous. But that's what this website was ranking for. Once again, we're changing this. We're getting up a new website, and it just hasn't made it yet. So why do these keywords matter? These meta descriptions matter. This is why. This is in my area, and it may be different if you're in a different geographic location, but it's going to be very close. If you type in alcoholism, you're going to find the first AA web page on about page 16 of Google search. That y'all know that's exactly where we all go to find information is page 16, right? If you type in how to stop drinking, the first AA web page you're going to find is Alcoholics Anonymous on page 13, and it's a Great Britain website, and they actually have an incredible website. You're going to find the first AA American website on page 19, and that's aa.org. This is not good, but the cool part is we found out it's fixable. Snippets, and then we're done with this part. The description Google pulls for your listing, and I'm going to show you some examples. So these snippets are these little descriptors right here. And if you'll notice, they're using the preamble from the grapevine, but the problem is, before we can find out who they're solving their common problem about or with, it gets chopped off. So we try to look for ways to change that. Here is a marketer that uses alcoholicsanonymous.com, and they have a pretty good description that fits the snippet. I'm going to show you one or two more examples. I pulled up the Wikipedia page because it has a much better snippet than we do. And these snippets are very important for the public and for our web ranking. So the Wikipedia one, it has a mutual fellowship with our stated purpose of enabling its members to stay sober and help out other alcoholics. That's pretty cool. It's not bad. And this is New York, and this is very typical. We have lots and lots of information here, but it doesn't tell anybody who doesn't know what AA is anything about AA. And these are the things we're wanting to fix. This is a little website we built for our Triangle Fellowship about a year ago. I think I started building this in June or July. And this is a little snippet from it. Now, I want to express that this is a very poorly built website. I know because I built it. But it has the right keywords. It has a good meta description. It has good content. And Google loves displaying websites with good content. And our AA websites have good content. They just don't have the descriptions and the easy stuff to fix them. So I just want to show you some of the other little things we're doing right quick, and then we're gonna stop the slideshow. This was a little advertising campaign we ran for social media just to get some analytics. See if we could get some click through on them. This is another one that we used in the self-help niche market just to see if we could get anybody interested. And we got some interesting analytics back from them. This is a Twitter page. Nobody's anonymity is being blown here. It's put up by this guy in East Lancashire, Great Britain. And this guy is kind of a Marty Man, one-man show. It is astounding what he's doing, but he's done really well with his Twitter page. And it's focused on the public and professionals. There's nobody posting their personal sobriety dates or anything like that on it. And this is one I created for our East Bay intergroup. And the same thing, we're reaching out to the public and professionals on this webpage. We aren't talking about our personal recovery. Again, Great Britain, this is an ad campaign they're running, and I threw this up because I just love it, folks. This guy is running around. You can imagine what he did before he got sober, and I'll let your mind run. He's running around to restaurants and bars and talking them into letting him put up these flyers and posters in their bathrooms for free. And if you'll notice really closely here, there's little card holders with cards in them that you can take a card with you with our name and number. I love this stuff. This is great stuff. This is some more of his campaign bus stops. He's in the train stations. This guy is blanketing Great Britain with his ad campaign. I just love it. He's also doing some smart, fun stuff that's fun that we don't have time to do. So this is a landing page that we built for East Bay Intergroup, and it just gives a lot of information about Alcoholics Anonymous all on the same page so that you don't have to click through because visitors don't like to click through. We still offer all the member services, but we have these landing pages for the public. So we've got a new landing page up for the public. And I want to point out something before I leave that page. This is something everybody can get involved with. Webmasters hate building this stuff. But you know what? If you will put together all the information, if you'll put it all on a text document and send it to them, they love building the pages. They just hate creating content. So get 2 or 3 of your people, build a public information page, a beginner's page, and your webmaster would probably be happy to put it up as long as they don't have to build content. They're thrilled to do it. So there's another option for service. Public information, this is our Valley Service Center, Sheila. I know this is your home group. They have built a beautiful webpage they started about 2 years ago, a beautiful website. And this is their new public information cooperation with the professional community page. And they did a grand job on this website. It's clean, it's very nice, it's very easy to traverse. And this was the only website we had up in the country for public information and cooperation with the professional community when that little doctor a couple of years ago asked me for more information. And this is out of Washington, Area 72, Western Washington, and it is the most in-depth public information website on the internet. It is just exceptional. And this is a brand new one that is an area website, which covers all of New Mexico, Area 46. They still have all the member services, all the meetings, all the events, but they also have all these wonderful pages about can you stop drinking, what is AA, and for the professionals. And this happens to be the page for the professional. And she added some things onto that page that might interest professionals. Simple content to educate them about who we are, the alcoholism in our community, and what we can do to help. And so this is a meeting app that Arizona Area 3 just built for PICPC. It's a little free app. They built it. It's very in-depth. It's got links to pamphlets on it, all kinds of wonderful information. And mobile, we know, is coming. And these mobile apps are very, very friendly to smartphones and other mobile platforms. So these are very cool. We're having one built for East Bay Intergroup. I hope to have it ready by this weekend, and it wasn't ready. I have a thing tomorrow that I wanted to show it on. We get a lot of questions about pamphlets at our PICPC group. These are my suggestions for reading if you're going to go out and speak to the community. The AA group pamphlet will give you the answer to just about any question anybody's going to ask you. The speaking at non-AA meetings is exceptional. It's very short, but it's very concise. And I understand that the 3 talks to the medical societies has been discontinued, but Bill's other talks, including this one, can be found in transcripts all over the internet. And Bill gave a lot of talks to the professional communities, and they're very insightful. So, of course, we have tons of pamphlets for the professional that you can always use. I just wanted to throw those in. This is one of my favorite pamphlets, and the reason being, it has this great description of alcoholism from the medical community in it. And it also has our description from page 30 and 31. And if I had a dream, it would be that this is included in all of our pamphlets. It's simple, concise information about what is an alcoholic. And we have such a wonderful way of explaining that with the big book. And so when they were writing the first edition of the big book, they had concerns about being accepted, but there had to be some other serious doubts. These folks were about to publish a book that suggests they know how to solve a problem that's plagued mankind for thousands of years, and they're going to do it by announcing, we drunks know how to fix ourselves. I don't think I would have had the guts for that myself. They were introducing many ideas that hadn't even been considered about the alcoholic, the illness idea, the allergy. They were going to suggest that women could also be alcoholics. That was new in 1940. Most of America, most of the professional community didn't believe women were alcoholics. They drink because of other problems. That was what was wrong with women who drink too much. So I just wanted to throw this in here that I'm going to throw in just a little bit. The other part that they brought up in the 1940s that I wouldn't have had guts, they told people that they thought that some new thinking and a higher power, any higher power they choose, that was in there as well. And how racy and heady was that stuff in 1940, that you could go out and pick your own God, right? So I wanted to touch on our history. For nearly 300 years, this country tried to find a solution for alcoholism. And until AA, there have been a few things tried and a few of them didn't work. I love this slide. This is from the women temperance movement. And these are some of the ladies taking charge of the situation. And you can just see this kind of happening, right? But I love that particular shot. Everybody's heard of the Washingtonians, and I threw this only in here. They were a temperance movement, but I threw this in here. Look at the sign in the background. Reforms for the drunkard, the sign, medical, not penal, treatment, reform. Those words, because they were locking us up in insane asylums and penal colonies. And these people wanted to change it and do something different. This was another temperance movement, and they remained popular up until the 1920s and 30s. And of course, the failed experimentation of prohibition. Penal colonies, jails, sanitariums for habitual inebriates were the only solution society had for alcoholics. History repeating itself, I've seen some amazing things the last couple of 3 years. Reminding me of the Keeley Institute, and this was huge in the 1890s through the 1920s. The Keeley Institute, through a franchise plan and company-owned treatment houses from the late 1880s through the 1920s, treated over 500,000 inebriates in the United States. This cure cost between $100 and $200 for the treatment and $21 a week to stay in one of their houses. That would be about $6,000 in today's money for the treatment, about $670 a week to stay there. The problem was they weren't doing anything to help these people. It was pretty much a scam from start to finish. These are the folks lined up for their injections. They got 4 injections a day given to you by a needle that was not sterilized between patients. Nobody can guess how many folks they killed just with 30 needles and infections, right? And most of the people believe that most of what was in the injection was probably alcohol and opioids. They did have a ladies' home. There weren't very many of them, and the ladies that went into them under assumed names. Almost nobody signed in their real name when they went in these homes. So over the counter and box cures was the next step. And for the history folks in the room, Nellie Bly, the first woman investigative journalist in America, helped bring this company down. Nellie Bly also has a little bit of story about some alcoholics in her life as well, if you ever get into it. So this is the list of some of what I like to call the early shakers and movers of AA. I'm not going to spend a great deal of time on this, but a lot of these people were non-alcoholics. Dr. Bob, of course, sponsored or worked with between 4,000 and 5,000 alcoholics, and Bill was a born promoter. Bill spoke at endless societies. These are some of the things I suggested you could read. He spoke at the American Journal of Psychiatry. He spoke in manufacturing and military industry outfits. He gave talks to Yale Law School or Yale School of Alcohol Studies, and of course the National Clergy Conference on Alcoholism, which used to happen once a year for the clergy. Kind of interesting we don't do that. This is a very controversial figure. He still is today. Clarence Snyder, but we have to give him some credit. Clarence Snyder did a lot of getting AA off the ground. He started the business model with the Salvation Army using recovered alcoholics, a model that would spread around the country. He started the theater group, which was the 4-week step process for newcomers, because he got all of these articles written in the newspapers, and they had drunks coming through the door in such numbers that they had to take them through the steps in groups. And this is just one of the 7 articles that were published in the Cleveland Plains Dealer that eventually led, of course, to the famous Saturday Evening Post. And I'm not going to spend much time on Marty Mann. There's some wonderful conferences this year on all of her great work. But she had this 4-point public relations campaign that alcoholism is an illness, that alcoholism can be treated, and that alcohol deserves treatment. Edward R. Murrow called her one of the most important voices to come along in the history of man. She was one of the top 4 speakers in the United States in the 1940s and 50s, and that's pretty amazing. So Marty carried this wonderful message. She also wrote this book that did pretty well. And I just recently found out that she provided a great deal more to the Hughes Act that passed in 1970 than I realized in the past. Bill Wilson, Marty Mann, and Earl T. all testified in front of conference for this Hughes Act. And this Hughes Act started the money for studies and for treatment in America. And they were all very involved in it. This all started in 1966 when President Johnson declared alcoholism a disease and started a commission to find solutions. President Nixon signed this act into law as he was headed out the door in 1972. It was the last thing he ever did. We're down to the last couple of slides, and I just wanted to show some astounding statistics. And I used some of the most conservative statistics I can find. 50 to 60% of the alcoholics in America die not knowing what AA is or what it does. That's heartbreaking. An estimated 95,000 people die from alcohol-related causes, but universities, the healthcare industry, government agencies, insurance agencies report 2/3 of the deaths from alcohol in the United States are not reported on the death certificates as alcohol-related because of this stigma that's still tied to this disease in the healthcare community. Doctors are now receiving between 0 and 4 hours of training. That comes from the 2016 Surgeon General's report. 2018, 10% of the doctors believe alcoholism is a disease today, and that's down from all of Marty Mann and Bill Wilson and everybody else's work in the 1970s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, when 70 to 80% believed that it was a disease. And only 7% of psychiatrists and therapists have training in alcohol and addiction today. So I just wanted to throw that out there. I had to throw up this wonderful study that came out in March of 2020 about Alcoholics Anonymous. It was done by Stanford and Harvard and the European Monitoring Center for Drugs and Drug Addictions. And they researched the endless studies about AA to determine its effectiveness. The Cochrane collaboration put their stamp of approval on this study, making it the first time they have ever endorsed a study on AA. This is the gold stamp of studies. And if you want to know more about this, you can go to YouTube and just type in, does Alcoholics Anonymous work? This is a 15-minute video that summarizes it. It's an excellent video. We obviously don't have time to play it, but just look for this little Stanford mark and this term right here, and it'll show up for you. And so we can all work together to help fix AA message in the public square. We're helping fix websites around North America, creating campaigns, helping folks fix their Google business listings. We have classes coming up for AA webmasters that need help. We have landing page language vetted by folks in the know. You are welcome to steal at will. We'll give it to you. On July 24th, we're having an event for professionals presented by professionals to see if we can find new ways to reach out to the public. And if you'd like any information on anything we are doing, please contact us at the email listed and we'll help you out. Anybody on this conference knows how to get a hold of me and they'll be happy to put us in touch with you. I end every slideshow with this because it just cracks me up. Science may one day find the solution, but you know, I'm not sure that it's going to do us any good. So that's the end of that. And I don't know how many minutes I have, but I did want to cover just a few things. I didn't notice when I started if somebody wants to yell at me.
Tim, you have just under 18 minutes left.
Oh, I can easily finish up. Let me take just a sip of coffee here. I've been talking all day. I don't believe I made it through the slideshow. I was expecting my voice to give out long ago. So we have some new messaging out in the public that I would like to bring up. We have a great deal of discussion in our rooms, the public square treatment industry and the mental health industry trying to blame this illness on the symptoms of alcohol, the lack of self-will, morality, dysfunctional family. We've all heard it. We need to resist the moralization of this illness. Some of us remember well some of the endless theories about what was wrong with all of us. One of my favorites was in the 1980s or 90s, if you went to a therapist, they were all convinced that we were latent homosexuals. Well, that was certainly true for me. But even in the closet, my gaydar still worked. And I had a message for these therapists. A bunch of these people in these AA rooms were not gay. I could tell. I was completely convinced they weren't. The expert scientists, those that spend their lives studying this complicated illness, have come to some conclusions. And believe it or not, in some of their most recent reports, they've actually made some suggestions about our AA rooms. Now, I know that we don't take suggestions from the outside, but why not listen to our friends occasionally? We are mentioned in many studies and government information pages. The 2016 Surgeon General's report I brought up is probably the most extensive report on alcoholism and addiction done in 40, 50 years in the United States. It came out in 2016. And the only organization mentioned in there is AA and 12-step groups as a solution for alcoholism. Now, I'm not saying we've got the only cure. I know people that have sobered up other ways. But as a whole, we hold the market. Those that spend their lives studying this complicated illness have come to some conclusions. They have a few suggestions. We are mentioned in the studies. We have spent the last 40 years letting non-alcoholic lay people and mental health define alcoholism. They are suggesting that we stop doing that. The pioneers of this program carried the common message that this is an illness, that the alcohol deserves to be treated, and that there is a solution. Strangely enough, that is what the experts are saying 80 years after Dr. Silkworth. Some of us feel the same way. There's a tremendous amount of research and investigation into alcoholism and addiction by our government in the Obama era. And several of the conclusions that became standardized across government institutions, that alcoholism and addiction should be removed from the arms of the mental health community and placed directly in the arms of primary health care folks. They even went so far as to suggest that mental health should not be included in the picture until such time as the alcoholic is properly detoxed and treated. And then the mental health workers can be brought in as well. This conclusion is the same for many of us came to decades ago. I spent a lot of time trying to get sober in offices that weren't AA. In this moment of time, possibly a moment in history that could change the public perception of alcoholism and addiction. In the face of all odds against this, can we face our fears and prevail? I think we have time for a small story, and this isn't a singular story, but I want to touch on this. I was in a meeting a couple of years ago or so. We had a newcomer come in, announce himself as an alcoholic, and that this was his first meeting as an AA, as an alcoholic. There was something different about his demeanor. He just didn't look like your typical newcomer. He didn't have that deer in the headlights look about him at all. He wasn't staring down at the floor. He was looking people in the face. And when he sat down, he wasn't staring at his shoestring. He was simply matter of fact about his first declaration. He later shared that he just turned 18. He'd been out drinking with his friends a few times, and he realized his drinking was not like his friends. The last occasion ended with some unwanted exploits. While his evening drinking would not count as off the rails for some of us in the room, it was obviously enough for him, right? This young man had been a member of Alateen at one time. He recognized the signs of alcoholism. He understood his condition was hereditary. He recognized the loss of control. He recognized that regardless how much he didn't like how the evening ended, he wanted to go out and do it again. Sounds very familiar to many of us in the room. In short, he started his drinking career and ended it with all the facts of alcoholism in his back pocket. He also related that night that he had a new understanding of his qualifying alcoholic family member. And that touched me. He finally understood. We've heard these stories in the rooms of Al-Anon and AA. Here's an idea. In 2021, every 16-year-old in America should be afforded that same information. It's not like we don't know what it is today. The simple signs of alcoholism, that it's a disease, that it's chronic, that it's deadly, there's no known cure, and left untreated, causes endless pain for those who suffer and everyone around them. How easy that would be to teach to everybody in America. So if I have time, and I think I do, I'm going to hit pamphlets for just a minute. I'm not the first to broach this subject at the conference, and I'm going to make a suggestion or two. I'm just going to put an idea out there to float. I'm not saying we should do it. It's just something I'm floating out there. One wonders in our need to be inclusive, and this has been a big discussion the last couple of years in our area and others. If we are not creating pockets of exclusiveness inside our own organization. This organization is probably the most inclusive in the world. We've opened the doors to everyone from the beginning, even my kind. We are a microcosm of the outside world. We can all name some meetings that refuse to honor AA and the traditions. We all know they're out there and we know where they're at. In the San Francisco Bay Area, there are meetings that I'm not welcome at in 2021. Have no fear, I am long past the days when I let others bother me. But I do worry about the newcomer. Fortunately, these meetings are the exception, not the rule, and we all know that. I wondered for a long time if the folks in the gay AA meetings could stay sober because I wasn't staying sober in the straight meetings. I was too scared to go and find out. That's the truth. I barely had the guts to come and hide out in straight AA. I get asked about why I don't attend gay meetings, always by members of the gay community in our rooms. My pat answer is this: I no longer need to fix my gay. I know many gay folks who won't go to mainstream AA after years in the program. I know what they are missing, the best part of AA, working with others, straight, gay, male, female. They are missing the principles of the program are not gender specific. I have been blessed with being able to sponsor everybody, and it's been one of the biggest blessings in my life. It's been wonderful. I do believe there's a place for special meetings, special interest meetings. I absolutely believe that. I certainly needed them when I came out. I needed to learn how to be comfortable in my own skin around my own kind. We need newcomers to be comfortable enough, just long enough, to hear the thread of hope. I don't need to wear my gay on my sleeve. I don't need to make it known, but I do need to make it known as politely as I possibly can in the rooms, so that the folks in the room that come in confused can see everybody in our rooms. And after 25 years of attending mainstream AA, it is amazing how many sober AA members have asked me for a conversation in the parking lot about the dreaded coming out problem. It is also sad how many suicides we have in the rooms even today because of the fear of coming out. In the 1990s, I was a GSR. There was a discussion at the area assembly about a pamphlet for Black women. After a lot of comments and a lot of discussion, a Black woman stood up and she wanted someone to explain to her why her alcoholism was different than everybody else's. That caught my attention. A while back, I was chairing the beginners meeting at our little fellowship. Before the meeting, there was a lady standing at the rack of pamphlets. She'd been to several of the meetings. She'd gotten comfortable with me and visited with me. She was holding 2 or 3 pamphlets, and she turned around, looked at me, and she gave me a funny look, like maybe I'd been keeping something from her. She asked if she was in the wrong AA. When I stand at that rack today, I frequently wonder how many are getting confused inside and outside our rooms with this interest to address every subcategory of alcoholic. I understand why we do it, but I'm wondering about the other side of that problem. Are we suggesting to newcomers that mainstream AA is not where you should be? Who will be left in AA mainstream AA? What happens when we have hundreds of women's and men's meetings, gay, bi, not sure if we're gay, people of color, agnostic, atheist meetings? Will special interests consume everything AA? And how does it move us away from that inclusiveness that we started with? When I sat in a room with a young Black newcomer walks in, I immediately check the room to see if we have a Black member present. It's not that I won't approach any newcomer that walks in, but I know as well as anyone, being welcomed by somebody that at least looks like me or is like me is one step closer to making that connection, right? I can remember how fearful I was when I walked in these doors. With all of our subcategories driving the groups, are we telling the public we are not inclusive by the mere production of these pamphlets? I don't know, but I think it's something we should ask ourselves. I need to wrap up. Messages for the coming years, and I'm done in just a minute here. In the next 10 years, there's going to be a ton of conversation about the brain disease of alcoholism. There's already a lot of it out there, and it's fascinating stuff. But Dr. Silkworth had it right from the start. He was 60 to 80 years ahead of it. The science is in on alcoholism and has been for 30 years. We have a biochemical inability to process alcohol like normal people. It's a flat earth conversation. There are no groups or researchers, scientists, or university study groups out there suggesting the science is wrong anymore. It's pretty done. The science to cure it is not in and may not be in for generations to come. And until it is, millions of alcoholics are going to continue to die. I had dozens of folks, professionals, some from our own rooms, ask me why I drink or why I relapse time and time again. I sometimes made up excuses, some of them true, most of them not. It's like the big book talks about, right? The truth was, I had no idea why I drank, and I had no idea why I relapsed. If I could focus one thing in AA, if our organization could accomplish one big goal, have a vision for the future, it would be this: that no alcoholic in America would have a doctor, a healthcare worker, a therapist, a counselor, a judge ask them why they drink. In 2021 America, everyone should know why an alcoholic drinks. I invite everyone to get involved in the committees that have to do with outreach to our future friends. And this isn't just C.P.C. We have Bridging the Gap and corrections and thousands of opportunities to go out there and get involved. These committees must be in the community. The conference cannot do the work on the ground. That's our job. The conference can support us in all kinds of ways, but the work's required on the ground, warm bodies on the ground. Not only will it affect the lives of others in ways you will never expect, I believe it'll affect your life, your sobriety, your spiritual path, just as it has affected mine. The bonus round of AA, as I like to call it, and as our founders promised us. I want to thank everyone for the opportunity to speak, the wonderful folks who made the effort to put this on. Thank you for inviting me. And most of all, I want to thank all of you for showing up.